History says John Wilkes Booth is buried in Baltimore. Some historians and descendants of Booth want to make sure and have gone to court to have the remains exhumed. Alex Dimitrick is at the Mitchell Courthouse now with details. Alex?
Well, Denise, what's happening in court is the culmination of a conspiracy theory that's been kicking around for most of this century, that John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of President Lincoln, actually escaped and lived on until 1903. Now, that's not what history says. It says that John Wilkes Booth was killed shortly after that assassination and is buried right here in Baltimore. Now, Booth's descendants want to make sure. Is this the mummified face of John Wilkes Booth? Some people believe it is, based upon this book, which claims Booth died in 1903 in Oklahoma, more than 40 years after he assassinated Abraham Lincoln. But history says Booth was buried in a family plot in 1869 at Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore, 5 years after he was killed in a Virginia barn by federal troops. The truth between the two versions ends at the grave, and Booth's descendants are looking here for an answer.
This whole situation's been brewing for so long. I think it's kind of reached the boiling point. And I think it's going to be done eventually, and I wanted it to be done in our lifetime.
To find out if John Wilkes Booth is buried in Baltimore, descendants went to court to get an order allowing Booth's remains to be exhumed. Greenmount Cemetery is fighting the request based on a debt of honor over a century ago with Booth's mother.
Cemetery contracted with her to ensure that the remains buried there then and thereafter would remain undisturbed, treated with dignity.
But researchers who believe Booth was mummified after dying in Oklahoma argue the remains must be studied to prove them right or wrong.
What is the cemetery afraid of? What are the other historians afraid of? If they're so sure that Booth is in that ground, they shouldn't be afraid to exhume him. We're not afraid to put our research on the line. Why are they?
If remains are unearthed, anthropologists will use an FBI technique called facial superimposition, reconstructing a face from a skull by using a computer and overlaying photographs to see if they match. That's provided a sound skull is found. All of which depends, of course, on whether Judge Joseph Kaplan will allow the remains to be unearthed. Denise?
Well, Alex, I know you have the answer to this question. If people believe that John Wilkes Booth was that mummified picture we saw, why not just study the mummy and see if you can determine it that way?
Well, the people who believe in the Booth conspiracy would like to do nothing more, but unfortunately the mummy has vanished. It used to travel the country for most of this century in carnival sideshows up until the 1970s when it disappeared. Its last rumored reported sighting was believe it or not, here in Maryland in a basement of a man who apparently has a large private mummy collection. You can believe that if you want to or not, but as of now, the mummy is missing.
The gravesite of John Wilkes Booth will remain untouched, and the body that lies inside will continue to rest in peace there. Judge Joseph Kaplan ruled today, quote, "There is no compelling reason for exhumation."
We were pleased and we were gratified.
Frank Gorman represents Greenmount Cemetery, the site where Booth's grave is located.
There really was no mystery, and there really was no doubt. I mean, if you'd been in the courtroom and seen and heard the evidence, it was truly overwhelming, the number of positive identifications of John Wilkes Booth that had been made.
But Booth's descendants say otherwise. They wanted to end a 130-year-old conspiracy theory. Many believe Booth was not killed 2 weeks after Lincoln's assassination. They believed he lived another 30 years under an alias. Relatives were not in court today, but their attorney, Mark Zaid, had this to say, quote, "We are disappointed, particularly because we thought it was our opportunity to put to rest a nagging controversy." He went on to say there are still a lot of questions that exist. "I don't think this will put it to rest. Only scientific evidence would do that."
And there'll probably always be a few who will believe that John Wilkes Booth escaped, no matter how much evidence you put in front of them.
And although court proceedings lasted 5 days, Judge Kaplan told me today that it was an easy decision. He says no decision is hard unless it's a matter of life and death, and that this case was not that matter.
Buried in the family plot. That's because the location of Booth's body isn't precisely known. And with evidence of water damage in the plot and no dental records for comparison, the judge said precise identification could be impossible. The court also found the conspiracy theory unconvincing. History says the Army tracked Booth to a Virginia farm 12 days after Lincoln's assassination. He was shot in the neck trying to escape a burning barn. Though family and friends identified the body, it didn't stop speculation, fueled by carnival sideshows, that Booth escaped and lived under the alias David George, dying in 1903.
Public interest is clear. The family members are all unopposed to it, and this is a very historic, significant act or time in our history that merits resolution.
Cemetery officials call the historical record complete, and Booth deserves to rest in peace.
There are some people in this world who refuse to believe facts.
On a more personal level, the decision means a promise Greenmount Cemetery made to Booth's mother, Mary Ann, back in 1869 can be kept. It promised never to exhume the remains, perhaps foreseeing the conspiracy theory that would exist 126 years later. At the Mitchell Courthouse, Frank Graff, WBAL 11 News.